This is day 2 of the May 88 7-day retreat. Several very similar questions have come up, brought up by different people in meetings. And we will talk about it here together this morning. The general topic is dependency. The questions were motive and dependency. This is how some of the questions were formulated. I reconstructed them. Why would I do this? Drive here for long hours, stay here for a few days or for a whole week, sit here in silence, if I didn't think I would attain something or get something out of it. And another question was, isn't there something deliberate in doing all this? Sitting down, choosing to be attentive, choosing not to go with thoughts. And then another question was, is there, and several people asked that, may there be a dependency developing in coming here to this lovely, quiet place? And also a dependency on Toni, listening to her talks, meeting with her. A dependency on the stillness here. It just occurs to me these questions would probably not arise if we didn't talk about motive, exposing our motives in what we're doing, our motive in coming here. And if we didn't warn of taking the word of the one who is giving the talks on authority, if there wasn't mentioning time and time again, one has to find out for oneself what this means, not to become dependent on the one who is saying things or writing things. On questioning whether it's possible to do anything without a motive. Out of this concern and questioning come these further questions. Don't I have a motive in coming here? Don't I have a motive in being attentive? And my coming here, listening to talks, going to meetings, does not that manifest a dependency? So if we bring up questions, we have to look, don't we? Look together. One person put it something like this: in the difficulty of one's daily relationship, at home, with the family, at work, the stress, the lack of energy often. It seems like a bright spot to think of this place, to come here and spend a week. So if one can at all afford the time and money to come here, does one come with the expectancy and with the expectation of what? Of getting something that one has experienced in the past, maybe profound stillness, the dropping away of wanting and fearing, and now wanting that again? Or if one cannot afford to come here, no time, no money, then is the thought the bright spot, just thinking about it as one thinks of any past pleasure? And the thinking of a past pleasure, the dwelling in that memory, arousing some good feelings in the midst of the low energy stress of the daily life. Noticing how good one feels if one brings up past memories, one becomes addicted to that process. It may not have to be thoughts about Springwater. It can be thoughts about anything that induces, any memory that induces pleasurable feelings. And the increased frequency with which one may dwell in those fantasies of past pleasant events or imagined future events, in dwelling there is what we may call an addiction. Having to bring it up time and time again. Or does the thought of Springwater, that bright spot at the moment of thinking about it, does it have to remain a thought at that moment? A memory which is tapped to arouse energy and good feelings temporarily? Or at the moment of remembering that, thinking about it, can there be a quiet listening, stopping, pausing, call it what you will, in the midst of the stress and feelings of depletedness, and just listening? The thought of Springwater bringing about this moment of listening, is that possible? Not dwelling on the thought and the memory, but the opening up to what is actually happening at this instant. Not touching it up or painting over it with rosy memories, but the total exposure to what's there. And the realization that any escape into different avenues of thought is escape. Dividedness, fear, not staying with what is really there. Meeting it, not one doesn't know, one only has these vague, murky feelings about it or ideas about it. But what it really is, one doesn't know. The ideas about it make one sick. The ideas and the separation that inevitably comes with dwelling in any idea, whether it is about how bad we feel or that we could be in Springwater. Maybe even at the moment of thinking about it, that bright spot, there is some time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Not to do anything. And just be with this not doing, not knowing what to do. And therefore, listening, attending. Sitting down in a chair, or whatever, standing still or walking quietly. Something happens if the mind recollects, as it were, or wonders, questions, and listens. Something happens. There's a change in the whole flow of energy. This is not a dogma. This is for each one of us to discover. How energy starts collecting or gathering when there's questioning and not knowing what to do, and not going with the habitual escapes, seeing them for what they are, not knowing what one will do without an escape, and finding that out. Having that degree of adventurousness, to not rely on what is known and safe and routine and familiar. That's what adventure is, isn't it? Somebody just mentioned to me recently he's going to go again someplace in, I don't know where, Alaska, where there's nobody around, being dropped off by an airplane, being there for 6 weeks alone, knowing the danger of it, and yet having to do that kind of exploration on one's own, in a territory totally unfamiliar. To be with the unfamiliar, we usually seek out these external unfamiliar situations in the mountains or in the desert or in the depth of the ocean. But the depth of unfamiliarity is right within oneself. If one lets go of all of one's ideas of what one is and what things are, conditions, states of mind and feeling and emotion, if one lets go of the maps, the ideas, the knowledge, and steps into it unprotected and unguarded, totally exposed to what's actually there, which turns out to be not what one thought is there, not what one thinks is there. Now, the question comes up, doesn't it? What's my motive for doing that? Don't I have a motive for that? Don't I want something at the end of the tunnel? Well, that's how the mind operates. It has ideas of what it will get out of something, has images of what is a goal, a possible state. We have heard and read so much since time immemorial about other states of consciousness. But that's all idea, isn't it? At the moment of wanting that, thinking about it and striving for it, that is idea right now, isn't it? Isn't it idea? And if one wants to find out, needs to find out what's actually there, there has to be clarity about what is idea and what is not idea. The moment there's questioning, is this an idea? Then this idea itself is under investigation. The very goal, the very motive itself is under investigation. It isn't just, it doesn't just run its mechanical, habitual course. And that's what happens if one comes here, no matter what one's motives and expectations may be. And we do arrive with those. This is how this consciousness works. It works on motive and goal, and means to the end. Trying to find or acquire means to get what we want. This is how we have been trained. This is how all of us function. And yet, in coming here, we begin to question that very thing. So what has maybe been intact, functioning, unquestioned, is open to looking and wondering about. And in the process of being questioned and the energy gathering in not knowing but wondering, looking, listening, the very motive may dissipate, cease operating, because something different is operating now. Listening to one knows not what. One knows not what to expect. One knows not what will come of it, because that's idea. One gets a glimpse, a feeling of that, a realization of what is idea and what is actually there. What's actually there is not known. It has to be approached differently, not with one's habitual knowledge and methods and techniques. One doesn't know what the right technique is, or if there is any technique, in just facing and wondering and questioning and listening to what's there, without bringing in past experiences. Please bring this up in meetings if it isn't clear. It's a marvelous thing to explore. Not to run automatically on anything that is perceived to be happening mechanically. Not to take anything for granted that comes into awareness at a moment of awareness. And here we come to the second question. Whether there isn't something deliberate in awareness, choosing to be aware. Deciding, I don't want to go with thoughts, I want to be aware. We can have these ideas that we would like to be aware and would choose awareness over thoughts. But do those trains of thought bring awareness? Or is one still moving in thought? Thoughts operating. Now about awareness, before about something desired or feared. Is it possible for the mind to discern what is thought and what isn't? Because there is this mechanism in the brain which we've called in the past the instant playback, where there is a memory of what just was appearing as some kind of a screen, or somebody called it a hologram in the brain. And then almost constant comment on what we are doing, what we did, what we are, what we should be. Constantly talking to ourselves, about ourselves, summarizing or going into great detail about what we are, what we've just done, what we should rather be doing than what we have just been doing. And that may masquerade for awareness. Thinking about oneself, analyzing what one remembers about just having done, said, felt, emoted, analyzing, reflecting upon. Is that what we feel as awareness? People so often say, I'm aware of what I'm doing, but it continues, it doesn't cease. Maybe this is what is going on, a commentary, a reflection, an analysis, adding to one's knowledge about oneself in pictures and words and ideas. Or as a fantasy is going on, is there a sudden coming to, waking up to the fact that there was fantasy? I'm saying that there was fantasy because if there's actually a coming to, a waking up, an instant of awareness, at that moment there's no fantasy. At that moment there is whatever there is. Realizing again that one is breathing after all. One may have wanted to follow the breathing, but during the fantasy there was no awareness of breathing. There is awareness of that. There may be the song of birds, or pain in the knee, the sound of someone moving or sneezing. And that awareness, I don't think was willed or intended or chosen. If one looks at that very carefully at the moment of coming to, one doesn't know how that happened. It just happened. But what happens at that moment is very crucial to observe. Usually there is no observation because one is immediately sucked into a train of thought about it. How many more days do I have to sit here before these fantasies will diminish? Or why don't I remain attentive longer now? Or why don't I get attentive more often? These reflections and thoughts, which are not awareness, I said it in one meeting, it's just like being at a train station and changing trains, getting out of one and into the other. If there's the immediacy of awareness, then there's also the immediacy of realization of what is thought and what is not thought. And the openness of what is not thought, and the limitation and enclosedness and mechanicalness of darkness of what is a track of thought, or tracks of thought, networks of thought. That is seen immediately. In awareness there is an intelligence that sees. There has to be no me choosing to be this way or that way. That happens in thought, in the realm of thought consciousness. That I would rather be attentive than inattentive, or would rather go with my pleasures than be attentive, because I may lose something, I may disappear, all of these fears that are generated when one thinks about being here, being aware, being attentive. That's all thought. And at a moment of awareness, can that be seen at a glance? Without the next thought immediately taking over, what am I going to do now? There's nothing to be done. There's nothing to be chosen. When there's choosing, on what basis do we choose? How do we choose? We reflect, don't we? We scan our likes and dislikes, what will be best for us according to past experiences or influence of others. It's thought always goes with thinking and scanning over the past memories. And on the basis of that, I make a choice, which is never complete or completely satisfactory, because there are so many alternatives that I could have also chosen. And they, of course, linger or come up in the mind. Maybe I shouldn't have done this, I should have done something else. And then the discontent that goes with choice. Choice always comes out of thought and past, with the me at the center of the stage, what it wants. for itself most, trying to weigh and never quite able to figure it out. When there's clarity, which means not the me at center stage, then what is there to choose? What one sees, what needs to be done. It's clear. Or it's clear that one doesn't know all the facts, one doesn't know. Has to get more facts or else one cannot decide. Does the question come up, how can I get clarity? That clarity that one wants to get is an idea, isn't it? Or a memory. And to be involved with striving for what memory projects as a goal is what? That's how we live. And get stressed and frustrated. Comparing, competing. Wanting more of it. This is our life. Or rather than projecting clarity and wanting that with all that goes with wanting to attain, can one question the confusion that's there, the lack of clarity, whatever is there? We're using words, but we don't know what's really there. What are these obstacles? What's going on? I'm not trying to reach out towards something, but wondering what is happening now. And in stopping, pausing in the reaching for the clarity, the goal, or the ideal, or the escape from whatever diseases one this instant. Just stopping in all of those reactions and opening up to what's really there. Out on a limb, if you will. Because one doesn't know what's going to come of it. In that wondering and looking inwardly, energy gathers and awareness comes. It happens that way. I don't know why. Awareness of what's here, not what the mind projects in a mind and thought created future. One may find as one wonders about what's actually here, listening, stopping the reaching, the escaping. One may find, after looking and wondering and sitting, walking, there isn't anything there. Because in the act of attending or listening, without knowing, without dividing oneself in what I'm here and what I want to attain tomorrow. No division, just what's there. The one who's looking is the one who's there, what's there. There's no division between the investigator and what is investigated. The whole thing is under investigation. In that mode, there's change. And what was there a moment ago or days ago when one came may dissipate, change, open up like a cloud cover. It's an amazing thing. One sees so many clouds in the sky, a mass of volume, and the sun comes out, and after a while there isn't anything left. Maybe a little rag here and a little bit of cloud there. Where did it all go? Out in California, they say the sun burns it all up. The morning fog. Wait till the sun comes out. It'll burn it all up, they say. So, coming back, I'm just talking about this state of there being nothing to, one wants to put it this way, to get one's teeth into. There's nothing. Then does thought start making headlines again? I'm nothing. There's nothing there. And the fear of that, the depressiveness, as some people say. Oh, can that immediately be seen for what it is? As it happens. If it's not seen, then thought has impact on the whole body. And then the depressive state generates its own thoughts about how terrible it is to be in a depression and so forth. And those thoughts generate more physical symptoms, so it's an unending process. Unless there's insight into it, which happens if the mind is really wondering about how it creates this whole world in which we live. And the sorrow and stress that goes with it, the frustrations. And whether there can be an end to it, one doesn't know. But the question comes up. And there's nothing wrong with a question like this coming up, as long as it leads to inquiry, to looking, not just to dreaming about paradise or Buddha lands or enlightenment or deliverance through someone, savior or bodhisattva. With that we come to the third part of the question. Is there a dependency developing here to the place, the environment, the stillness, to Toni, talks, meetings? Is there? Who can answer this for oneself if this question comes up? One can make pronouncements about the place, saying that's what they're getting into. They're getting into a new dependency. They all say they have to come here for retreat and so forth, and then say what is happening to other people. But whether there is dependency or not can only be checked out in oneself. in checking it out intelligently, one has to be clear about what one means by dependency, because we do use words very freely and allow these words to have impact on ourselves and others, and then reacting to the impact, dealing with that. It goes on and on and on, without first finding out what do we mean by this word dependency before we use it. What do we designate when we use the word dependency? I want to see it directly. When I say I'm dependent on someone or something, what do I mean? What is going on in the mind and the brain and throughout the body? When I say I'm dependent. We won't say when he is dependent or she. We'll say when I am dependent. We talked already about one manifestation of dependency, these bright spots appearing in the mind, a thought of a remembered good feeling or good experience, and with the thought, the impact on the body. Something happens chemically or electrochemically or whatever that gives energy, good feelings. So one thinks more and more and more about that which gives the body good feelings. There can be a real dependency on that thought. And that dependency is only broken when, what we talked about earlier, it doesn't just remain with a thought, but one looks at what's actually happening this moment. No longer just thinking and imagining, but inquiring and attending directly, immediately. That process doesn't leave memory. It's a total process. It's not memory, it's not thought. It's something different. And every time it takes place, it's new. Because it doesn't come out of memory. It comes out of now. Now, coming to a quiet place of great natural beauty like Springwater. The good food. Well, everything that goes with it. Maybe some clarification in talks. Really listening together. And the no division between the listener and what is heard, they're just being what is. In talk or in meeting. There. Maybe getting rest for the first time. And at home there's late hours and all the drag of one's daily life. I'm not painting black pictures, I'm just giving back what people tell me about. So one begins to feel better, healthier, more buoyancy, lightness. Is that an addiction? Is that a dependency? To realize that living in a certain way, one feels better. It's a fact, isn't it? A person who is addicted to drugs, let's say, could turn this thing around and say, you are addicted to no drugs. I'm addicted to drugs, but you're addicted to not taking them. If one understands what makes for living healthily, does this mean that one is becoming addicted to this? We're all addicted to brushing our teeth. Or is it clear what happens if one brushes teeth and what happens when one doesn't brush teeth or wash the body, wash the clothes? It's so noticeable what happens. If the digestion functions well, there is good bowel movement. Does one become addicted to that? The whole body thrives when it functions well. And not just the body. Although the brain is part of the body. When does something become a dependency? Actually, with coming here and seeing thought, and maybe the thought slowing down or ceasing a train of thought which one has been rolling over and over and over, and one sees the whole thing and it stops, it's finished, one doesn't go into that circuit anymore. It's just like a elimination. Like a physical elimination, a bowel movement is the dropping of useless thought circuits. They may still go on for a while or in a certain form, but it's finished. One isn't drawn to it. It doesn't have the power. It's a cleansing kind. Mind is freeing itself from this stuff. And because it is free of it, it functions healthily and joyously. Not all the time, but there's a buoyancy in that. Is that the fact that this happens and that one realizes what brings this about? Is that dependency and addiction? I think those words are not used properly that way. If it becomes a memory which is brought up, we've gone through it, and one just milks it for the good feelings that memory brings, that can be addictive. That's how memory operates. It's addictive. Good memories, bad memories. But the actual seeing of memory and the freeing of it, that's living intelligently, not addictively, not dependently. Because one understands for oneself what is going on, what happens, what leads to what. And in the understanding of it, when there's energy and insight, one doesn't have to go on with a habit that's so clearly exposed. It was so taken for granted. It's a marvelous thing to discover. One doesn't have to go on with it. There's no choice in that. It's clear. So in coming here, in listening to a talk or talking together in meetings, and something clarifies, and one comes again to clarify, is there dependency? Does one have to come here to clarify? Maybe one does. I don't know. Can one start to clarify the moment the bright spot appears in the mind, the thought about spring water? Can one clarify it right then and there? What's memory and what's real? And the buoyancy of this happening on its own, one needs no one for it. And yet, being here is obviously different from being in a city with a smog, with a noise, the crowdedness, and so forth. We don't have to name it all. The crowdedness brings tension on its very own. There have been sociological, psychological studies on the higher the density of population, the greater the likelihood of tension, frustration, crime, violence. There is nothing magical or amazing about being on the top of a hill or side of a hill in quietness, very fresh air. Still some wildlife around. And having direct touch with it, because the mind isn't just constantly worrying and thinking and churning. There are moments of direct touch with this natural life, of which we're an integral part. And to realize the beauty of it, the strengthening of it, the love of it. And to want to come again. Is that addictive? Is that dependency? I think we haven't gone deep enough into this whole thing. What is it that feels dependency? Wanting, craving, remembering, projecting. Wanting a better feeling for itself, a better image of oneself. I think this is where really the root of dependency is, in being caught in the idea of oneself. Maybe we should leave this for tomorrow, because it requires a lot of attention and energy to go into this whole question of what is the self, and because it is this self that is addicted and dependent. If not on this, then on that, and if not on that, then on something else. And one dependency dropped, another one picked up. So why this dependency on oneself as an idea, a cherished image. That's the root of all dependency, isn't it? Addiction to the idea of oneself, what one is. And what one can become, or would like to be. When that whole process is absent, maybe this whole problem of dependency doesn't exist. We will end here for today.